Wealthy CEO asked the fat daughter of the black maid to dance as a joke. Faya in love after the first. Blake wove through the crowd with practiced ease, nodding at board members and investors who'd come to celebrate his engagement to Senator Williams' daughter. The chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors where Connecticut's elite celebrated dynasties merging. He approached Layla with his camera-ready smile, the same one that graced business magazines and investor pitches. Has someone ever made joke because of your looks? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. He only asked her to dance as a joke until his fingers brushed against hers. And suddenly, the champagne-fueled dare became the moment that would destroy his perfectly planned future. Bet you won't ask the maid's daughter, Jackson said, champagne sloshing in his glass as he nodded toward the corner of the ballroom. The other groomsmen snickered, eyes following his gesture to where Layla stood alone, her curves draped in a simple black dress that screamed discount rack amid a sea of designer labels. Blake Remington, CEO of Connecticut's fastest-growing fintech company and tonight's celebrated groom-to-be, raised an eyebrow. 20 grand says, I not only ask, but make her smile. The men erupted in laughter. Easy money. The fat black girl who'd spent the evening hugging the wall wouldn't know what hit her. Blake wove through the crowd with practiced ease, nodding at board members and investors who'd come to celebrate his engagement to Senator Williams' daughter. The chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors where Connecticut's elite celebrated dynasties merging. He approached Layla with his camera-ready smile, the same one that graced business magazines and investor pitches. Would you care to dance? He asked, extending his hand with rehearsed charm. Layla looked up, suspicion immediate in her eyes. She'd heard the whispers all night. She's just the help's daughter. Her mother had cleaned the Remington estate for 20 years, and this pity invitation was the only reason she stood in this ballroom instead of serving drinks in it. What? The question was blunt, her voice steadier than her heartbeat. Something shifted in Blake's expression, surprise at being challenged, perhaps. Because I'd like to dance with the most interesting person in the room. Interesting. That's what they call it now. Layla almost laughed. I heard your friends. I know a dare when I see one. Blake's practiced smile faltered. For the first time that evening, something genuine crossed his face. Embarrassment. Dance with me anyway, he said, voice dropping lower. Prove them wrong. Against her better judgment, Layla placed her hand in his. The moment their fingers touched, something electric passed between them. The music faded. Time slowed. Blake's eyes widened slightly, his grip tightening as though he'd touched a live wire. They moved onto the dance floor, and suddenly the joke wasn't funny anymore. Blake couldn't look away from her eyes, deep brown and unimpressed, seeing through his charm to something hollow beneath. She didn't simper or flirt or try to impress him. Instead, she moved with quiet confidence, her curves brushing against him with each step. Your fiancé is watching, Layla murmured, nodding toward the edge of the dance floor where Catherine Williams stood in ice blue silk, champagne flute gripped too tightly. I know, Blake said, but he didn't look away from Layla's face. This isn't worth $20,000, she said. His step faltered. You heard that part too. These walls have housed generations of men making bets over women's dignity. My mother taught me to listen. Her words cut through his carefully constructed world. The song's ending. You've won your bet. Congratulations. But as the music faded, Blake didn't release her hand. Something genuine had awakened in him. Recognition, perhaps, of something authentic in a room built on performance. Have dinner with me tomorrow, he said suddenly, the words surprising even himself. Layla's laugh was short and genuine. I'm not a charity case, Mr. Remington. Blake, he corrected automatically. And this isn't charity. Then what is it? Before he could answer, Catherine's voice cut through the moment. Blake, darling, who's your new friend? Her smile was diplomatic perfection, her eyes Arctic winter. The lie formed instinctively on his lips, that this was business, an obligation, nothing. But as he looked at Layla, the words tasted bitter. For the first time in his privileged life, Blake Remington wanted something he shouldn't. "This is Layla," he said simply. "Layla, my fiancée, Catherine." "The maid's daughter," Catherine said, recognition dawning. "Ow. Community-minded of you to include her. Mother always speaks highly of her help." She linked her arm through Blake's. "The donors are waiting, darling." As Catherine pulled him away, Blake looked back at Layla, something unfinished hanging between them. The groomsmen collected around him, slapping his back, demanding payment for the completed dare. But Blake barely heard them. The ballroom seemed suddenly hollow, a golden cage of expectations and performance. And somewhere in the corner, a woman in a simple black dress slipped away, unaware that everything had just changed. Have you ever had a single touch change everything you thought you knew? Have you felt that instant connection that makes you question all your choices? Drop a comment if you've ever experienced that moment when your life split into before and after. For 3 weeks, he told himself it was guilt, not desire, that kept her face appearing in his dreams. Blake stared at quarterly projections on his monitor, numbers blurring as his mind drifted back to the engagement party. Catherine had noticed his distraction immediately afterward, her questions razor-sharp beneath pleasant smiles. "You seemed quite taken with the help's daughter," she'd said later that night, removing diamond earrings worth more than what Layla's mother earned in a year. "Just being polite," he'd answered, the lie easy after years of corporate diplomacy. But now, alone in his corner office overlooking the Manhattan skyline, Blake couldn't maintain the pretense. Glass and steel monuments to ambition and power spread before him. Yet all he could see was the hurt in Layla's eyes when she'd overheard his friends laughing. His assistant knocked before entering. The wedding planner sent revised reception options. And Senator Williams called, again. Blake nodded, guilt twisting deeper. Catherine's father had been calling daily, discussing merger opportunities between Blake's company and the senator's political connections. The wedding wasn't just a marriage. It was a business arrangement generations in the making. Also, the final guest list needs approval by Friday. When his assistant left, Blake opened his desk drawer, extracting the handwritten staff list his mother had provided for the engagement party. His finger traced down to Mavis Johnson, domestic staff, 25 years, and the note beside it, daughter Layla Johnson, courtesy invitation. Before he could reconsider, he pulled out his phone and found the staff contact information. His heart raced as he typed, "I need to apologize in person. Coffee tomorrow." He pressed send before logic could intervene, then watched in disbelief as 3 dots appeared. She was actually responding. "Why?" came the reply. "Because I owe you that much." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, fine. Harmony Coffee, Harlem, 2 p.m. Not showing up would be more honest than your apology. Blake leaned back, adrenaline coursing through him. He told himself this was about making amends, about clearing his conscience before the wedding. But that night, his dreams betrayed him again. In the dream, they were still dancing, but no longer in his family's ballroom. They moved through a smaller space, her body closer, her scent, something warm and spiced, filling his senses. His hands explored curves he'd only briefly felt during their dance, and her eyes held no judgment, only heat. He woke sweating, Catherine sleeping peacefully beside him, her body slim and familiar. Wrong. The thought ambushed him, and he pushed it away immediately. Nothing about his carefully constructed life could be wrong. The path had been laid generations before him. Remington men married strategic allies, built empires, created legacies. Desire for the wrong woman was a temporary madness, nothing more. Yet as his driver navigated toward Harlem the next day, Blake checked his appearance with unprecedented anxiety. The coffee shop was nothing like his usual meeting spots. No valet, no recognition from staff, no reserved table. Through the window, he saw her already waiting, reading a book, curves unapologetic in jeans and a deep purple sweater. His heart hammered against imported wool suit material as he straightened his tie. A CEO preparing for the most important negotiation of his life. When was the last time your mind betrayed you, wanting someone you never should have noticed? Tell me below if you've ever been haunted by a connection you couldn't explain. She came to tell him off, came with practiced words of disgust and dismissal, until he looked at her like she was the only person who had ever truly existed. Layla had rehearsed this moment for days. She would be ice and dignity. She would accept his corporate apology, then cut him with precision about exactly what men like him represented. She'd even dressed strategically, nothing that could be mistaken for trying to impress him. The coffee shop hummed with jazz and conversation, mismatched furniture and local art a universe away from his sterile boardrooms. Here, his tailored suit was the costume, not her curves. Blake entered looking simultaneously powerful and lost, his eyes finding her immediately. Something flickered across his face. Relief, before he navigated between tables toward her. "You came," she said, closing her book. "Did you think I wouldn't? Men like you make promises they don't keep all the time." He didn't flinch at the barb. Instead, he sat down, his usual confidence muted. "I deserve that. You deserve worse." Layla watched him, waiting for the performative apology she'd anticipated, the kind designed to make him feel better, not her. "I know." He ran a hand through perfectly styled hair, messing it slightly. "I've been thinking about what to say to you. Some perfect apology that would make what happened okay. But there isn't one." The rawness in his voice caught her off guard. "Then why are we here?" "Because I haven't slept properly since that night." His admission hung between them, too honest for comfort. "Because I treated you like a prop in my privileged life, and you deserved better." Layla studied him, looking for the calculation behind his words. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." His eyes held hers. "I know your mother has worked for my family for 20 years, yet I never knew her name until recently. I know you're taking night classes in design while working days. I know you have every reason to hate me, yet you still showed up today." She blinked, surprised. "You looked me up." "Yes." "Why?" Blake's fingers drummed the table, a crack in his polished veneer. "That's the question I keep asking myself." The barista brought their drinks, his black coffee, her chai latte. Their fingers brushed accidentally as they both reached for sugar, and that same electric current from the dance floor sparked between them. "You don't get to use me to feel better about yourself," she said, voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" Blake looked around the coffee shop, at the diverse crowd going about their day, a world away from the sterile wealth he navigated. "I don't know. That's what scares me." The honesty disarmed her. Layla had prepared for arrogance, for performative guilt, for charm, not vulnerability from a man whose life had been constructed around projected strength. "My mother warned me about men born into money," she said. "They think everything and everyone has a price." "And what did she say about men who recognize their mistakes? That they're the most dangerous kind." Layla took a sip of her drink. Temporary enlightenment feels like transformation until privilege comes calling again. Blake leaned forward. "What if it's not temporary? 28 years of evidence suggests otherwise." "I'm not asking you to trust me," he said. "I'm just asking for the chance to prove my mother raised a better man than I showed you that night." Something in his intensity made her pulse quicken. This wasn't the same calculated charm from a ballroom. This was something raw, unfiltered. "And your fiancée? Does she know you're having coffee with the help's daughter?" His jaw tightened. "Catherine believes what's convenient. Like everyone in our world. Not your most compelling argument for trust." Blake's laugh was unexpected, genuine, almost self-deprecating. "I'm doing this all wrong." Against her better judgment, Layla smiled. Spectacularly wrong. That smile changed everything between them. Blake looked at her like he'd discovered something precious, his hand unconsciously moving toward hers on the table. "Have dinner with me," he said again, this time without artifice. Not as apology, just dinner. Rational thought screamed warnings, but Layla found herself nodding. One dinner. That's all. Neither noticed the phone discreetly aimed their way from 2 tables over, capturing the moment his hand covered hers, the moment her defenses visibly crumbled, the moment that would explode across tomorrow's tabloids. Have you ever given someone a second chance they might not deserve? What made you stay when everything logical said to walk away? Share your experience in the comments below. The headline screamed betrayal. Tech CEO cheats with Maid's daughter. But what the grainy photos couldn't capture was how, for the first time in her life, Layla felt truly seen. Blake's phone exploded with notifications at 5:37 a.m. Catherine's name flashed first, followed by his mother, his PR team, and board members in rapid succession. The New York Post had run the coffee shop photos front page, his hand covering Layla's, their eyes locked in what looked unmistakably intimate. By sunrise, Catherine had arrived at his penthouse, ice blue eyes matching her tone. "Tell me this is some misguided community outreach." She thrust the paper at him, glossy nails denting the page. The photo showed more than Blake had realized. The camera had captured something raw between them, something impossible to dismiss as business or obligation. "It's not what it looks like," he said automatically, the corporate response to crisis. "Don't insult me." Catherine's voice remained perfectly modulated, future senator's wife training. "Is this some rebellion before settling down? Because I've accommodated your indiscretions before. But this," she jabbed at Layla's image. "The help's daughter? My father's investors are calling Blake." The mention of investors should have snapped him back to reality, to the empire waiting, to responsibilities generations deep. Instead, something hardened in him. "Her name is Layla," he said quietly. Catherine's perfectly composed face cracked slightly. "You actually care about her." It wasn't a question, and Blake didn't answer. He couldn't. The truth was forming in real time, surprising even himself. "Fix this," Catherine said, sliding her engagement ring onto the counter. "Today, or the wedding's off." She left with perfect posture, the door closing with dignified quietness that somehow felt more damning than a slam. Across town, Layla's morning unfolded with equal chaos. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with notifications, each alert another nail in the coffin of her privacy. Outside her apartment, photographers gathered like vultures, hungry for the story of the full-figured black girl who stole a white prince from his ivory tower. Her mother called in tears. "Mrs. Remington is asking questions, Layla." "My job. I'll fix this," Layla promised, shame burning her cheeks as she closed the blinds against telephoto lenses. How had a single coffee, one moment of weakness, exploded so spectacularly? The headlines painted her as predator and victim simultaneously, opportunist and exploited woman, homewrecker and charity case. When her phone lit up with Blake's name, her stomach dropped. This would be the end, his practiced apology, his retreat to privilege, his family closing ranks. "Layla," his voice sounded strained. "Are you okay?" The question surprised her. "Am I okay? Your fiancé. I know. I need to see you. That's literally the worst idea possible right now. Please." Something in his voice, desperation perhaps, caught her off guard. "Not about the photos. About us. There is no us, Blake. There's you with your perfect life and me with my mom's job on the line. I've ensured your mother's position is secure," he said quickly. "And my life is far from perfect, especially today." Layla pressed her forehead against cool glass. "This will blow over. Go back to your fiancé. Blame it on pre-wedding jitters. Rich men get forgiven for worse every day." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. "What if I don't want forgiveness?" he finally asked. "What if I want something else entirely?" Her heart hammered treacherously. "Don't say things you'll regret when your board members finish yelling at you. They've been yelling for hours." His laugh held no humor. "My mother has called 17 times. Catherine returned her ring. "And all I can think about is seeing you again. This isn't a fairy tale, Blake. Tomorrow, your people will present you with a neat solution that makes this disappear. I'll be buried under NDAs and settlement offers. That's how your world works. It doesn't have to." The raw conviction in his voice sent shivers through her. This man had the power to destroy her life, her mother's job, her privacy, her future, yet something in his tone made her believe him. "One more meeting," he said. "Tonight. My driver will bring you to my apartment. Security will ensure no photographers. Just to talk." Every rational thought screamed refusal. Yet Layla heard herself say, 9 o'clock. I'll be gone by 10. The hours crawled by, each news notification worse than the last. By evening, her simple life lay exposed across social media. Her job, her school records, her family history dissected by strangers debating her worth. At precisely 9, a knock came at her door. Through the peephole, she saw him, Blake Remington, CEO and heir, looking utterly lost without his armor of privilege. "They're wrong about us," he said through the door. "Let me in, Layla. Please." How would you react if your private moment became public spectacle? If strangers dissected your worth based on your appearance or background? Share your thoughts below. Behind closed doors, with the world determined to misunderstand them, they created a truth that belonged to no one else. "You shouldn't be here," Layla said, even as she stepped aside to let him in. There are photographers everywhere. Blake entered her apartment, his usual confidence diminished. Without boardrooms and ballrooms framing him, he seemed almost ordinary, a man who had run out of rehearsed lines. "I came through the service in trance," he said. "Old buildings have their advantages." Her apartment told the story her words wouldn't. Textbooks stacked beside the couch, half-finished paintings leaning against. "So this is where the other woman lives?" she said, bitter humor coating her words. Disappointed, Blake took in the modest space. The carefully patched walls, the second-hand furniture arranged with artistic intention, the bookshelf overflowing with designed texts and dog-eared novels. "No," he said simply. "It feels like you." The comment disarmed her. Layla had expected judgment or patronizing approval. Instead, he moved through her space with curious respect, pausing at her sketches. "These are remarkable," he said, examining a half-finished fashion illustration. "You're talented. Compliments won't make this situation disappear." Blake turned to face her, exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath his eyes. "I'm not here for damage control." "Then why are you here?" "Your entire world is imploding because you had coffee with me. Because none of it matters." The words hung between them, dangerous and absolute. The engagement, the merger plans, the board's panic. It all feels hollow now. Layla crossed her arms protectively. "You don't mean that. One scandal doesn't erase 28 years of privilege and planning." "Maybe it should." He ran a hand through disheveled hair. "Maybe it took one real moment to show me how artificial everything else has been." "Real?" She laughed without humor. "We've spent exactly 97 minutes together, including that dance." "That's not real, Blake. That's novelty." "Then why does it feel more authentic than relationships I've had for years?" The question hung between them, unanswerable. Blake moved closer, his expensive cologne mixing with the familiar scent of her apartment. "The PR team prepared a statement," he said quietly. "It positions you as an old family friend. Says the photos were taken out of context during a charity discussion. Convenient. The rich white savior and his pet project. I didn't approve it." His eyes held hers. "I can't keep pretending." Something in his intensity made her pulse quicken. This wasn't calculated charm. This was a man whose carefully constructed world was crumbling by choice. "What exactly are you saying?" "I'm saying I called off the engagement. Permanently." His voice was steady despite the magnitude of his words. "Not because of the scandal. Because marrying Catherine while feeling this way about someone else would be unforgivable." The confession hung between them, too enormous to process. Layla backed away slightly. "You don't even know me. I know enough." He stepped forward, eliminating the distance she'd created. "I know your laugh is real, not practiced for social advantage. I know you see through performance to truth. I know when you look at me, I feel simultaneously exposed and accepted. That's not love, Blake. That's projection." Maybe his hand reached for hers, hesitant. Or maybe it's recognition. Their fingers touched, that same electric current flowing between them. His hand moved to her face with gentle reverence, thumb tracing her cheekbone as though memorizing its curve. "I've never wanted anything the way I want this," he whispered, his face inches from hers. 28 years of boundaries and expectations stood between them. Different worlds, different paths, different futures planned by others. Yet in this moment, none of it mattered. His lips met hers with unexpected gentleness. His hands cradled her face like something precious, not forbidden. The kiss deepened, years of restraint dissolving into hunger neither had acknowledged until this moment. Layla pulled back, breathless. This changes nothing. Tomorrow, your world will close ranks. Reality will return. Let it try. His forehead pressed against hers, thumbs tracing circles on her skin. I've lived my entire life following a script someone else wrote. For once, I'm choosing my own story. Her phone lit up on the coffee table, interrupting the moment. The text from his fiancée glowed accusingly. Fix this by morning or the wedding's off. For one breathless moment, their eyes met over that glowing ultimatum, a crossroads disguised as a threat. Tomorrow would bring consequences neither could fully predict. Careers, reputations, family ties, all hanging in delicate balance. Yet as Blake's arms encircled her, Layla felt something she'd never expected. The exhilarating free fall of choosing truth over safety, desire over expectation. Tomorrow would come with its storms, but tonight belonged to them alone. Well, have you risked everything for a feeling you couldn't explain? Was it worth the cost? Share your story in the comments below. By sunrise, he had lost his fiancée, his family's approval, and the board's confidence. Yet watching her sleep, tangled in his arms, Blake felt rich for the first time. Morning light filtered through Layla's thin curtains, painting golden stripes across her bed. Blake traced them with his fingertips, following the path of sunshine across her bare shoulder. She slept deeply, her breathing steady, unaware of the storm gathering beyond these walls. His phone had died hours ago, a blessing that postponed the inevitable. The world was waiting with consequences, but here in this bubble of honesty, Blake felt a clarity he'd never known. Last night had been revelation. Not just physically, though her curves had fit against him with an intoxicating perfection, but emotionally. They'd talked until 3 a.m., her head on his chest, sharing truths normally buried beneath social performance. She told him about growing up watching her mother clean other people's homes, about scholarship applications rejected, about designing clothes no one would let her model. He'd confessed the emptiness of achievement without purpose, the loneliness of connections based on advantage rather than affection. When they'd finally fallen into each other, it wasn't with the awkward hesitation of strangers, but the hungry recognition of souls finding home. Now, reality waited. Blake slipped from bed, found his discarded pants, and plugged in his phone. It lit up immediately. 37 missed calls, 54 text messages, and an email from his board requesting an emergency meeting at 9 a.m. That bad. Layla's voice was husky with sleep. She sat up, sheet clutched to her chest, eyes clear and direct even in waking. Worse, he showed her the screen. The board wants to see me. Of course they do. She pushed wild curls from her face. The Remington heir throwing away a strategic marriage for the maid's daughter? I'm surprised they waited this long. Blake sat beside her, taking her hand. I don't regret a single moment. You might after today. Her thumb traced circles on his palm. Your world doesn't forgive disruption. It's not my world anymore. The certainty in his voice surprised even him. Not if it can include you. Layla's eyes softened with something between tenderness and worry. Blake, one night doesn't erase reality. You have responsibilities, a company, a family legacy, and none of it matters if it's built on emptiness. He kissed her palm. I've lived 28 years following a blueprint I never questioned. Maybe it's time I design my own life. She studied him, searching for doubt. Your board will demand damage control. They'll want you to paint me as a mistake. Let them try. He stood, gathering his rumpled shirt. I should go home to change before the meeting. Can I see you tonight? The question hung between them, not just about tonight, but about possibilities neither had dared imagine yesterday. Yes, she said simply. The boardroom fell silent as Blake entered, 12 pairs of eyes evaluating the cost of his indiscretion. The Wall Street Journal lay open on the table, their coffee shop photo circled in red like evidence at a crime scene. Blake, Richard Harmon, his father's oldest friend and board chairman, gestured to the empty seat. We've been discussing options for containing this situation. Blake remained standing. There's nothing to contain. I've ended my engagement to Catherine Williams. The silence deepened, shock rippling visibly around the table. You can't be serious. Victoria Chun, head of investor relations, broke first. The Williams merger represents 30% of our projected growth next year. Then we'll find growth elsewhere. Blake's voice remained steady. My personal life is not a business transaction. It is when you're the face of this company, Richard countered. When your decisions affect thousands of employees and millions in shareholder value. I'm still CEO. My ability to lead hasn't changed. Your judgment has. Richard slid a document across the table. The PR team has prepared a statement. You are meeting Ms. Johnson to discuss a community initiative. The photos were misconstrued. Catherine understands your charitable interests sometimes require personal attention. Blake didn't touch the paper. That's a lie. It's damage control, Victoria corrected. Senator Williams called this morning. He's willing to smooth things over, keep the merger on track, if we handle this discreetly. By handle, you mean erase Layla from the narrative. Richard's expression hardened. By handle, I mean protect what 3 generations of Remingtons have built. Your grandfather started this company with nothing. Your father expanded it through strategic relationships. And you're willing to jeopardize all of it for, what? A girl you barely know? Blake's phone buzzed in his pocket. His mother's name flashed on the screen, her 18th call since yesterday. He silenced it without answering. I know enough, he said quietly. Victoria leaned forward. Blake, be reasonable. No one's saying you can't have companions. Discretion has always been the approach. But this public display, with someone from your household staff's family. Enough. Blake's voice cut through the room. Layla is not a companion. She's not a charity case. And she's not a mistake I need to erase. Then what is she? Richard asked. The question hung in the air, demanding definition for something too new, too raw to label. She's the first real thing in my life, Blake answered finally. And I won't apologize for that. Richard exchanged glances with the other board members. Then you leave us no choice. We'll need to discuss a temporary leave of absence while you sort through these personal matters. You're suspending me. We're protecting the company, Victoria corrected. Temporarily. Blake looked around the table at faces he'd known his entire life. His father's friends, his mentors, people who'd attended his graduation and celebrated his achievements. Now, they looked at him like a problem to solve, a liability to manage. I understand, he said finally. You'll have my response by end of day. As he turned to leave, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voicemail notification from his mother. Against better judgment, he played it as he walked to the elevator. You've humiliated this family for a girl who will never belong in our world. His mother's voice hissed through the speaker. Your father would be ashamed. 28 years of opportunity, connections, privilege. Thrown away for what? Some misguided rebellion? Fix this, Blake, before you lose everything that matters. He stepped into the elevator, his mother's words echoing in the confined space. When the doors opened in the lobby, Layla stood waiting, her expression grave. I saw the news, she said quietly. It's everywhere. Blake reached for her hand, but she stepped back. Your mother called mine this morning, she continued. Suggested it might be best for everyone if Mom took early retirement. She can't do that. She could do whatever she wants. That's how power works. Layla's eyes glistened with unshed tears. This is exactly what I was afraid of. I'll fix it, Blake promised. I'll talk to my mother. Make sure your mom's job is secure. That's not the point. Layla's voice cracked slightly. This is just the beginning. Your family, your company, your entire world is going to make us pay for last night. And for what? A connection that might not survive the pressure. It will survive. You can't know that. She gathered her coat closer, a protective gesture. I won't be the reason you lose everything. As she turned to leave, Blake caught her arm. You're the reason I finally understand what everything actually means. Layla hesitated, conflict visible in her eyes. Your mother's right about one thing. I don't belong in your world. Then I'll build a new one, he said simply. With you. The promise hung between them, either the most foolish or bravest words he'd ever spoken. For a moment, Layla's expression softened. Then her phone buzzed with a text, and reality intruded again. I have to go, she said. Mom needs me. She slipped away through the revolving doors, leaving Blake standing alone in the marble lobby of the building that bore his family name, a name that suddenly felt like both burden and stranger. What's the most valuable thing you've sacrificed for love? Would you do it again, knowing the cost? Share your thoughts in the comments below. She disappeared from his life as completely as if their connection had been a fever dream, but the hollow ache in his chest was painfully real. 3 days, 72 hours since Layla had walked away in the lobby. Blake had called, texted, even sent a courier to her apartment with a handwritten letter. Nothing. She'd vanished, her phone going straight to voicemail, her social media accounts suddenly private or deleted. His penthouse overlooking Central Park had never felt so empty. Vast spaces filled with expensive things that suddenly seemed meaningless, like props on a stage set for someone else's life. Blake wandered from room to room, phone clutched in his hand, waiting for a response that never came. The board had placed him on voluntary leave, pending resolution of his personal situation. His mother had stopped calling, shifting to icy silence that spoke volumes about his standing in the family. Catherine had given an exclusive interview to Town and Country, positioning herself as the dignified victim of his midlife crisis, conveniently aging him a decade in the process. None of it touched him the way Layla's absence did. On the 4th day, he broke. Calling his driver, Blake headed to the Remington estate in Greenwich, determined to find Mavis Johnson and get answers about her daughter. The estate sprawled across manicured acres, the colonial mansion a monument to old money and older privilege. Blake hadn't visited in weeks, avoiding his mother's disapproval even before the scandal. Now he strode through familiar halls with the discomfort of a stranger. He found his mother in the sunroom, arranging flowers with precise movements that matched her carefully controlled expression. Blake, she didn't look up from her roses. I assumed you'd be in Barbados with your new friend. Where's Mavis? He asked, ignoring the barb. No longer employed here. She snipped a stem with surgical precision. She chose to resign. You fired her because of me. Now his mother looked up, blue eyes cold. She resigned because her position became untenable. Her daughter made certain of that. Her daughter has a name. Yes. One currently linked with yours in every gossip column from here to Los Angeles. She set down her scissors. Do you have any idea what you've done? The Williams merger is dead. Your father's friends are questioning your stability. The club is buzzing with speculation about your preferences. My preferences? For women who look like her. The delicate emphasis made her meaning clear. They're saying you have a type. That perhaps this explains your reluctance to settle down with appropriate candidates. Disgust rose in Blake's throat. You mean they're wondering why I'm interested in a black woman who doesn't fit their narrow beauty standards? Don't be crude. His mother arranged another rose. I'm simply conveying the conversation. This will pass, of course. Scandals always do. Catherine's father has indicated they might still be open to reconciliation, given appropriate contrition and perhaps a more favorable merger arrangement. I'm not getting back with Catherine. Don't be absurd. Of course you are. She spoke with absolute certainty. This rebellion has made its point. You've had your adventure. Now it's time to repair the damage. Blake stared at this woman who had raised him, suddenly seeing the rigid boundaries of her worldview with painful clarity. Where is Mavis now? He asked again. His mother sighed. I provided an excellent severance package. More than generous, considering the circumstances. That's not what I asked. I have no idea, nor do I know where your little friend is gone. She met his eyes directly, though I suspect she's realized the limitations of this connection. Girls like that always do, once the novelty wears off. The casual cruelty stunned him, not because it was new, but because he was finally hearing it clearly. Her name is Layla, he said quietly, and you're wrong about her. About everything. His mother's expression softened slightly. Darling, I understand the appeal is something different. Your father had similar diversions. It's practically a Remington tradition, but you don't marry the diversion. You don't throw away your birthright for a temporary fascination. This isn't a fascination. Then what is it? She challenged. Love? After what? 2 meetings. Don't be ridiculous. Blake had no answer that wouldn't sound exactly as naive as his mother suggested. How could he explain that 2 meetings with Layla had felt more genuine than years of strategic dating? That her absence left him hollow in ways he'd never experienced before? I need Mavis's contact information, he said instead. I can't help you. His mother returned to her flowers. Some chapters are best left closed, Blake. For everyone involved. He left without another word. The familiar halls of his childhood home now feeling like a museum of values he no longer recognized as his own. Back in the city, Blake threw himself into finding Layla. He hired a private investigator, checked hospital records, even visited her design school. Nothing. It was as if she'd evaporated, taking with her the brief, bright moment of authenticity he'd glimpsed. At night, alone in his penthouse, he dreamed of her. The weight of her in his arms, the sound of her laugh, the way she'd looked at him with both challenge and acceptance. He woke reaching for her, the emptiness beside him more painful than any business loss. On the 7th day, his assistant forwarded an envelope that had arrived at the office. No return address, just his name in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a simple note. She's staying with her cousin in Brooklyn, 247 Lafayette Avenue, apartment 3B. She won't thank me for telling you. Mavis Johnson. Blake stared at the address, heart racing. Then he grabbed his keys, bypassing his driver. Some journeys needed to be made alone. The Brooklyn neighborhood couldn't have been more different from his Manhattan world. Brownstones with character rather than prestige, streets alive with community rather than status. He found the building, no doorman, no security, just a weathered buzzer panel. He pressed 3B, holding his breath. Who is it? A woman's voice, not Layla's, crackled through the speaker. I'm looking for Layla Johnson. Silence. Then, she doesn't want to see you, Mr. Remington. So she was here. Relief flooded through him. Please, just 5 minutes. She said you'd come eventually. The voice sounded resigned. 3rd floor. But I'm warning you. She's made up her mind. The door buzzed open, and Blake took the stairs 2 at a time, heart hammering against his ribs. At 3B, he knocked, straightening his jacket in a reflexive gesture that suddenly seemed absurd. The door opened to reveal a young woman with Layla's eyes but sharper features. 5 minutes, she said, stepping aside. And there was Layla, standing by the window, arms crossed protectively. The sight of her hit Blake with physical force, relief, and longing, and something deeper he couldn't name. You shouldn't be here, she said quietly. You disappeared. I removed myself from the equation. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her. It was the right thing to do. For who? For everyone. She gestured vaguely. Your company, your family, your future. None of that matters without you. Layla's cousin slipped out, closing the door behind her. It all matters, Blake. Layla's voice softened. You just can't see it because you're in the middle of this, whatever this is. It's not a phase. It's not rebellion. It's not slumming. He stepped closer. It's the first real thing I've felt in 28 years. And what happens when the novelty wears off? When the excitement of defying expectations fades? When you realize what you've sacrificed? I know exactly what I've sacrificed, he said, and none of it compares to what I found with you. Layla shook her head, but he could see the conflict in her eyes. My mother lost her job because of one night with you. I'll make it right. I'll hire her at triple her salary. That's exactly the problem. Her voice cracked slightly. You think money solves everything because that's your world. Throw cash at problems until they disappear. Then tell me what to solve it, he pleaded. Tell me how to fix this. You can't fix it, Blake. Some divides are too wide to cross. He closed the distance between them, not touching her, but close enough to feel her warmth. I don't believe that. Neither do you. For a moment, her resolve wavered. He could see it in the softening of her mouth, the slight lean toward him that her body couldn't suppress. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't be the reason you lose everything. You're the reason I found anything worth having." The words hung between them, simple and devastating. Layla's eyes filled with tears she refused to shed. "Please go," she said finally. "This hurts too much already." Blake wanted to argue, to pull her into his arms, to make her see what he felt with absolute certainty. But the pain in her eyes stopped him. Whatever this was between them, forcing it would only cause more damage. "I'll go," he said quietly. "But this isn't over, Layla. What we found, it doesn't just disappear because it's inconvenient or complicated." He reached into his pocket and placed a business card on the side table. "This has my personal number. When you're ready to talk, if you're ever ready, I'll answer, day or night." At the door, he turned back one last time. "For what it's worth, I'd choose you again." Every time, the walk back to his car felt endless, each step taking him further from the one person who had made him feel truly alive. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Another crisis, another demand, another pull back to the world he'd been born into. But as he slid into the driver's seat, a different notification caught his eye. An invitation delivered by courier to his office and forwarded by his assistant. His former fiance's wedding to someone else, just 3 months after their breakup. The handwritten note read, "I found someone who doesn't need to slum for excitement. Time for you to grow up and come home to your real life." The paper crumpled in his fist as clarity struck like lightning. He knew exactly where he needed to be, and it wasn't crawling back to a world built on appearances rather than truth. Have you ever walked away from something real because you thought it was the right thing? Did you regret it? Share your experience in the comments. She opened her door to find him kneeling there, not with a ring, but with truth so raw it stripped away every defense she'd rebuilt. 3 weeks had passed since Layla had sent Blake away from her cousin's apartment. 3 weeks of throwing herself into work, of ignoring the gossip that followed her, of pretending the hollow ache in her chest was anything but heartbreak. She'd moved back to her own apartment once the media circus died down. The photographers had found fresher scandals to chase, leaving her to rebuild her life in relative peace. Her design classes became her refuge, her sketches darker and more powerful than before, emotion channeled into creation. Her mother had found a new position with a finance executive's family in Westchester. The pay was better, the hours more reasonable, but Mavis carried a new wariness in her eyes. The knowledge that 20 years of loyal service could end in a moment. Layla had just settled in for a quiet Friday night, takeout and textbooks, the glamorous life, when a knock came at her door. Not the building's buzzer, but an actual knock, meaning someone had been let in by another tenant. Through the peephole, she saw him, Blake Remington, kneeling in her hallway, soaking wet from the spring storm raging outside. She opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "What are you doing?" Rain plastered his hair to his forehead, designer clothes soaked through, vulnerability replacing privilege as his greatest possession. He looked up at her with eyes stripped of pretense. "I've been sitting in my car for 2 hours," he said, voice hoarse, trying to find the perfect words, the irrefutable argument, the grand gesture, and I've got nothing but the truth. He remained kneeling, water pooling around him on the worn hallway carpet. "I miss you. Every day. Every hour." With an intensity that scares me. Layla crossed her arms, fighting the urge to pull him inside, to dry his hair, to feel his arms around her again. "Blake, we've been through this. I know. You're protecting me from consequences. You're being practical. You're being selfless." His words tumbled out with raw honesty. "But what if I don't want protection? What if I want the consequences if they come with you?" A neighbor's door opened down the hall. Mrs. Abernathy, the retired teacher from 4C, peered out curiously. "You should come inside," Layla said reluctantly, stepping back. Blake rose, following her into the apartment that had haunted his dreams for weeks. Nothing had changed, yet everything felt different, charged with memory and possibility. "You're soaking my floor," she observed, fetching a towel from the bathroom. He accepted it gratefully, running it over his hair. "I'm not here because I lost everything," he said, voice breaking. "I'm here because losing you showed me what everything actually means. The raw vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't the polished CEO or the privileged heir. This was simply a man, stripped of armor, asking for a second chance. "What happened?" she asked, keeping distance between them. "Why now?" "Catherine's getting married. To a hedge fund manager. The invitation arrived today." Layla's heart sank. "So this is about your pride?" "No." He stepped closer, still dripping. "It's about clarity." Seeing her move on so quickly, so strategically, it crystallized everything. That world, those connections, they're transactions disguised as relationships. What we had, brief as it was, contained more truth than my entire life before you. "Blake, I've spent 3 weeks respecting your decision," he continued. "I've stayed away. I've tried to forget. I've thrown myself into damage control and reputation management and all the things my world values. And none of it matters." His eyes held hers, unflinching. Not the board position they've offered to reinstate. Not the family legacy they're dangling as incentive to grow up. Not the connections, or the privilege, or any of it. Layla swallowed hard. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I choose you. Not as rebellion. Not as experiment. Not as some statement against my upbringing. Just you, Layla Johnson, the woman who saw through every layer of performance to the person underneath." The sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. This was everything she'd wanted to hear, everything she'd told herself was impossible. "Your family can accept my choices or not. That's their decision. Your company will survive with or without me. And if I return, it will be on my terms, not theirs." Layla shook her head, fighting tears. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple." He closed the distance between them, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. The complicated part is everything else. The expectations, the judgments, the systems designed to keep people in their assigned places. But this, he gestured between them. "This is the simplest truth I've ever known." She wanted to believe him, wanted to fall into his arms and forget the world outside this apartment. But fear held her back, not for herself, but for him. "What if you regret it?" she whispered. "What if one day you wake up and realize what you gave up?" "What if I don't?" he countered. "What if this is exactly where I'm meant to be? What if everything before was just preparation for finding you?" A smile tugged at her lips despite herself. "Now you sound like a Hallmark movie." "I'll take it." His answering smile was genuine, reaching his eyes. Hallmark movies have happy endings. The moment hung between them, possibility crackling like electricity. Then her phone rang, shattering the bubble. Her mother's name flashed on the screen. "I should get this," she said, stepping back. Blake nodded, giving her space. "Mom? What's wrong?" Layla's face drained of color as she listened. "When? Are you sure?" A pause. "I'll be right there." She ended the call, hands shaking. "What happened?" Blake asked, alarm replacing hope. "They fired her," Layla said, voice hollow. "After 3 weeks. Said it was downsizing, but she overheard them talking about avoiding another Remington situation. Your family's revenge just claimed its first casualty." Blake's face went pale. "This ends now." "What do you mean?" I'm done playing by their rules." He pulled out his phone. "Where is she?" "I'm sending a car." "Blake." "Trust me, Layla." His eyes met hers, fierce with determination. "This time we fight back. Together." As she gave him her mother's address, something shifted between them. Partnership replacing protection, shared purpose replacing separation. The battle lines weren't just drawn. They were about to be redrawn entirely. What words would someone need to say to earn back your trust? Is there such a thing as a perfect apology? Tell me in the comments below. He was born into wealth that taught him to avoid consequence. She was raised in resilience that taught her to face it head on. "This is insane," Layla said, watching Blake pace her small living room. "You can't just declare war on your own family. Watch me." His voice held a determination she hadn't heard before. 20 years of loyal service, and they fire your mother out of spite? This ends today. The car he'd sent had brought Mavis to Layla's apartment. The older woman sat on the couch, dignity intact despite the day's humiliation, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The posture of someone accustomed to weathering storms not of her making. "Mr. Remington," she said quietly, This isn't your battle. Blake, please. He stopped pacing to face her directly. And it became my battle the moment they used you to punish me. Mavis studied him with the careful assessment of someone who had spent decades observing the wealthy from the shadows. Your mother won't take this challenge lightly. I'm counting on it. Blake sat across from her. Mrs. Johnson, Mavis, I need to know everything. Every conversation you overheard in 20 years of service. Every document you saw. Every family secret they assumed you were too invisible to notice. Layla gasped. You're not seriously asking my mother to... I am. His eyes never left Mavis's face. Not for revenge. For leverage. Understanding dawned in the older woman's eyes. You want to force a truce. I want to ensure they never target you, or Layla, again. Mavis nodded slowly. The Remingtons have always believed staff are furniture, present but not listening. It's remarkable what people say when they think no one important is in the room. For the next hour, Mavis spoke. She detailed financial discussions she'd overheard while dusting bookshelves, questionable business practices mentioned over breakfast, political arrangements made in the privacy of the family study. 20 years of secrets, absorbed by a woman whose intelligence had been consistently underestimated. Blake took notes, his expression growing grimmer with each revelation. This is worse than I thought, he said finally. The Williams merger wasn't just business, it was covering tracks. What do you mean? Layla asked. The senator has been helping my family bury certain regulatory issues for years. The marriage would have cemented that arrangement. He ran a hand through his hair. No wonder they panicked when I ended the engagement. What are you going to do? Layla's voice held equal parts fear and admiration. First, I'm hiring your mother as a consultant for my personal office. Effective immediately, with a contract and compensation package that reflects both her experience and her discretion. Mavis blinked in surprise. Mr. Remington, Blake, that's not necessary. It's entirely necessary and long overdue. He turned to Layla. And second, I'm going to have a conversation with my mother. One that establishes new boundaries. They'll destroy you, Layla warned. They'll try. His smile held no humor. But they forget I'm a Remington too. I just happen to have different values. The next morning, Blake drove to Greenwich alone, despite Layla's insistence on accompanying him. This is something I need to do myself, he'd told her, kissing her forehead. Some conversations are 28 years overdue. The Remington estate loomed behind wrought iron gates, manicured gardens hiding decades of privilege and prejudice. Blake entered not as the prodigal son, but as a man with purpose sharper than inheritance. His mother received him in the study. His father's domain before his death, now her command center. She wore pearls even at home, armor against disorder. Blake, her greeting was cool, but not hostile. I was beginning to wonder if you disappeared permanently into your alternative lifestyle. We need to talk, Mother. He remained standing, declining the offered seat. About Mavis Johnson. The housekeeper, she waved dismissively. That situation has been handled. Yes, I know. You fired her after 20 years of service because I refused to fall in line. His mother's expression hardened. Her employment became complicated. Surely you understand why. I understand perfectly. Blake placed a folder on the desk between them. Just as I understand why the Williams merger was so important to Father's friends on the board. She glanced at the folder, but didn't touch it. What is this? Insurance. He opened it, revealing documents and notes. Mavis Johnson may have been invisible to you, but she has excellent hearing and an even better memory. His mother's face paled as she scanned the first page. This is absurd. The ramblings of a disgruntled employee. Perhaps. But I wonder how the SEC would view these ramblings about the offshore accounts, or how certain campaign finance committees might interest themselves in the Williams connections. You wouldn't dare. Her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. This is your family, your legacy. A legacy built on what, exactly? Blake challenged. Exploitation. Manipulation? Using people until they're no longer useful. On excellence, she snapped. On standards. On maintaining position in a world that would gladly see us fall. And that justifies everything. The casual cruelty, the discarded people, the strategic marriages. His mother stood, anger finally breaking through her controlled exterior. You have no idea what it takes to maintain this family's position. Your father understood. He made necessary compromises. Like his diversions, Blake's voice was quiet but cutting. The women you so casually referenced. She flinched slightly. That's different. Is it? Or is it exactly the same system that taught me people are disposable? That connections are transactions? That love is a luxury for those who don't have empires to maintain. For the first time, his mother seemed at a loss for words. Here's what's going to happen, Blake continued. Mavis Johnson now works for me, with a contract and compensation package that acknowledges both her skills and her discretion. You and your friends will leave her and her daughter completely alone. And if I refuse, then these documents find their way to people who would be very interested in their contents. He closed the folder. I don't want war, Mother. I want peace, but on new terms. She studied him with new eyes. Not a rebellious son, but a formidable opponent. You've changed. I've grown up, just not in the direction you expected. A long silence stretched between them, generations of expectations hanging in the balance. And the girl, his mother finally asked, is she worth all this? Layla, Blake corrected firmly. Her name is Layla. And yes, she's worth everything. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because right is right, regardless of who it benefits. Another silence, this one thoughtful rather than hostile. You sound like your grandfather, she said finally. Before the money, before the position, he had that same moral certainty. Blake hadn't expected that. I never knew him that way. If you did, success changed him, as it changes most people. She touched the folder lightly. Keep your insurance, Blake, and your housekeeper, but understand what you're choosing. A harder path than the one laid out for you. I understand exactly what I'm choosing. His mother nodded once, a gesture of recognition, if not approval. Then I suppose we have an understanding. It wasn't victory or reconciliation, but it was a beginning, a redrawing of boundaries that had seemed immutable just days before. When Blake returned to Layla's apartment that evening, the weight of generations felt lighter on his shoulders. She opened the door before he could knock, worry etched across her features. What happened? She asked, pulling him inside. Truce, he said simply. Not peace, not yet, but space to breathe. Relief flooded her face. And my mother? Safe, employed, and considerably better compensated than before. Layla launched herself into his arms, the barrier of caution finally breaking. Her body collided with his with the force of everything unsaid, her fingers digging into his shoulders, his mouth claiming hers like territory long denied. They don't get to decide, he growled against her neck. Not about us. Not anymore. They've barely made it to the bedroom, clothes marking a trail of urgency across her apartment. This wasn't the careful exploration of their first night together, but something fiercer, a claiming, a celebration, a declaration of independence from expectations that had kept them apart. Afterward, tangled in sheets and each other, Layla traced patterns on his chest. What happens now? Now we build something new, he said, kissing her forehead. Something that belongs to us, not to family expectations or social boundaries. That easy, huh? Her smile held both hope and skepticism. Not easy, he admitted, but worth it. As they drifted towards sleep, Blake's phone lit up with a notification. He ignored it, focusing instead on the woman in his arms, on the future suddenly opening before them. He didn't see the email from his family's lawyer. The first salvo in a battle that was far from over. Notice of legal action. Remington Family Trust versus Blake Remington. The lawsuit papers arrived the next morning. His family suing for control of his company's shares, citing compromised judgment and destructive personal choices. The battle lines weren't just drawn. They were carved into the foundation of everything he'd built. Why have you had to choose between family expectations and your own truth? What did that cost you? Share your experience in the comments below. The media called it a modern Romeo and Juliet, but they weren't star-crossed lovers fighting fate. They were warriors challenging a system designed to keep them apart. All rise. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Harriet Coleman entered, her robes swinging with authority as she took her seat. Outside, news vans lined the courthouse steps like modern town criers, hungry for the spectacle of old money fighting dirty. Inside, oak panels and tradition pressed down like judgment, until Layla walked in, head high, curves unapologetic in a fitted dress that announced she would not be diminished. Whispers followed her progress down the aisle, but she kept her eyes forward, focused on the back of Blake's head where he sat beside his attorney. The Remington family had launched their attack with surgical precision. A lawsuit claiming Blake's emotional instability and compromised judgment rendered him unfit to control his voting shares in the family company. They sought temporary conservatorship of his business interests for his own protection and the protection of shareholders. It was a declaration of war disguised as concern. Blake turned as Layla approached, his face lighting with the first genuine smile she'd seen in days. The stress of the lawsuit had carved new lines around his eyes, but seeing her seemed to ease them momentarily. "You came," he whispered as she slid into the seat beside him. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away." She squeezed his hand. "Though your mother's lawyers tried." His expression darkened. "What do you mean?" "I received a friendly visit suggesting my presence would complicate matters unnecessarily." Layla's smile was steel beneath silk. "So naturally, I bought a new dress and made sure to arrive early." Pride and worry battled in Blake's eyes. "They'll use you against me." "Let them try." She straightened his tie with casual intimacy. "I've spent my life being underestimated. It's practically my superpower." Across the aisle, Eleanor Remington watched this exchange with thinly veiled disgust, her attorney. A silver-haired man whose suit cost more than Layla's monthly rent, leaning close to whisper in her ear. "The vultures are circling," Blake murmured. "Then let's give them something to choke on." Judge Coleman called the court to order, and the battle began in earnest. The Remington attorney painted a picture of Blake as a man in crisis, a previously stable executive whose sudden, radical behavior changes suggested emotional breakdown. Mr. Remington abandoned a strategic merger, publicly embarrassed his fiancée, and has been making increasingly erratic business decisions, the lawyer argued smoothly, all coinciding with his relationship with Ms. Johnson. Blake's attorney countered with evidence of his continued business acumen, deals successfully negotiated during his leave of absence, financial decisions that had actually strengthened the company's position. "What we have here," she argued, "is not a man in crisis, but a man in transformation." Mr. Remington's personal choices may not align with his family's preferences, but they have in no way impaired his business judgment. The arguments continued through the morning, legal jargon barely disguising the true nature of the fight: control. Not just of company's shares, but of Blake himself, his choices, his future, his right to determine his own path. During a recess, Blake and Layla slipped away from the crowded hallway, finding momentary privacy in an empty conference room. "You're doing great," she assured him, straightening his tie again, a gesture that had quickly become habit. "They're bringing Catherine in as a witness this afternoon," he said, tension evident in his jaw, "to testify about my concerning behavior patterns leading up to our breakup. Let her talk. The truth is on our side." Blake pulled her close suddenly, his kiss desperate and consuming. Layla responded with equal hunger, her hands gripping his lapels as the stress of the morning found release in physical connection. "We shouldn't," she gasped as his lips moved to her neck, her body arching against his despite her words. "Probably not," he agreed, backing her against the conference table. "But I need this. Need you." The danger of discovery only heightened the intensity between them. The forbidden thrill amid formal proceedings, the private truth behind the public battle. His hand slid under her dress, finding bare skin above her stockings. "5 minutes," she whispered, already unfastening his belt. "Then we have to get back." "5 minutes," he agreed, lifting her onto the table. They came together with urgent need, months of connection distilled into stolen moments. The risk of exposure, the stress of a lawsuit, the uncertainty of their future. All of it channeled into this physical affirmation that whatever happened in that courtroom, what existed between them was real and undeniable. Afterward, they straightened clothing and smoothed hair with conspiratorial smiles. That was, Blake began, necessary. Layla finished, pressing a final kiss to his lips. Now let's go win this thing. They returned to the courtroom separately, but the glow of their encounter must have been visible. Eleanor Remington's eyes narrowed as she took in her son's relaxed posture, the slight flush still evident on Layla's cheeks. The afternoon proceeded with Catherine Williams taking the stand, perfectly composed in cream silk that emphasized her slender elegance. She spoke with practiced sympathy about Blake's increasingly distracted behavior and concerning fixations in the weeks before their breakup. He became obsessed with authenticity, she testified, making the word sound like a disease. Questioning our social circle, our mutual goals, even the merger his father had worked toward for years. And when did these changes begin? The Remington attorney asked. Catherine's eyes flicked to Layla. Around the time he met her, the implication hung in the air that Layla was not just a symptom, but the cause of Blake's supposed breakdown. During cross-examination, Blake's attorney approached with deceptive gentleness. Ms. Williams, you're engaged again. Is that correct? Yes. Catherine's smile was camera-ready. To Harrison Ford, the actor, the judge interrupted, surprised. No, Your Honor. The hedge fund manager, Catherine clarified, her composure slipping slightly. And how long after your breakup with Mr. Remington did this engagement occur? Catherine shifted in her seat. Approximately 3 months. That seems rather quick to recover from the heartbreak of a broken engagement. Harrison and I had known each other socially for years. I see. And did your father's investment firm recently acquire a significant position in Mr. Ford's hedge fund? Catherine's perfect mask cracked slightly. I don't involve myself in my father's business dealings. No further questions, Your Honor. The message was clear. Strategic relationships weren't Blake's invention. They were the currency of their shared world. Catherine stepped down, avoiding eye contact with everyone as she exited the courtroom. By late afternoon, Judge Coleman had heard enough. Her ruling sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Blake would maintain control of his company's shares, but at a cost. Complete financial separation from family holdings, effective immediately. This court finds no evidence of compromised judgment or emotional instability, she declared. Mr. Remington appears to be making deliberate, if unconventional, choices. He is entitled to do so without family intervention, even if those choices diverge from family expectations. The victory was bittersweet. Blake had won his freedom, but lost his place in the family structure that had defined him since birth. As his mother stormed out, she hissed words meant only for him. She'll leave once the novelty wears off. Girls like that always do. The doubt those words planted took root like poison. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions about the modern Romeo and Juliet story and class warfare in Connecticut's elite circles. Blake pulled Layla through the crowd to the waiting car, both of them silent until the door closed, sealing them in privacy. We won, she said finally, searching his face. Did we? His voice held an edge she hadn't heard before. I'm cut off from family holdings, company resources, generations of connections. But you're free, she reminded him. Free to make your own choices. At what cost? The doubt crept into his voice. What if my mother's right? What if this is all temporary? Your interest, my rebellion, all of it. Layla stiffened. Is that what you think this is? My interest in you? No. He took her hand. No, of course not. He broke off, struggling to articulate the fear taking shape. What if we've burned everything down only to discover we can't build something lasting from the ashes? The question hung between them, giving voice to doubts neither had allowed themselves to acknowledge. The adrenaline of battle had carried them this far, but now, in the quiet aftermath of victory, uncertainty crept in. I don't have answers, Layla said finally. I just know that what we have feels more real than anything I've experienced before. Isn't that worth fighting for? Blake pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "Yes," he whispered. "God, yes." But as the car carried them back to the city, his mother's poisonous words echoed. "She'll leave once the novelty wears off." The seed of doubt had been planted, and in the fertile soil of insecurity, it began to grow. Have you ever found strength in someone else when the world was against you? Tag that person who helped you stand tall in the comments below. They survived the world's judgment only to face a more dangerous enemy, the whispers of doubt in their own minds. 2 weeks after the courtroom victory, Blake and Layla stood in their new apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. Neither his penthouse nor her modest space had felt right for this next chapter, so they'd found neutral territory, a spacious loft in Brooklyn with exposed brick walls and windows overlooking the bridge. The cardboard boxes sat like physical manifestations of their unresolved questions. His designer suits hung beside her thrift store finds in the closet. Expensive kitchen gadgets mingled with her mismatched dishes, their lives merging in ways both beautiful and awkward. Where should this go? Blake held up an abstract sculpture, a graduation gift from his father. Layla glanced up from arranging books. "Wherever you want. It's your art. It's our place," he corrected, setting the piece on a shelf. "Our decisions." She nodded, but something in her expression seemed guarded. The word "our" still felt foreign on her tongue, as though speaking it might jinx whatever this was becoming. Blake had thrown himself into rebuilding after the court battle, establishing an independent investment firm, recruiting talent away from his family's company, creating something entirely his own. On the surface, he was thriving in his newfound independence. Yet at night, Layla would sometimes wake to find him staring at the ceiling, the weight of generations pressing down despite his declarations of freedom. For her part, Layla had returned to design school with renewed focus, her work attracting attention from professors who had previously overlooked her. A small feature in a local fashion blog had highlighted her boundary-breaking aesthetic, with a not-so-subtle mention of her controversial relationship with tech scion Blake Remington. They were making it work. They were proving the doubters wrong. They were happy, weren't they? "I was thinking," Blake said, breaking the silence as they unpacked. "We should host a dinner party. Invite some of my new investors, some of your design friends. Show everyone this isn't just." He trailed off, but the unfinished thought hung in the air. "Just what?" Layla prompted, setting down a stack of books. "Just a phase," he finished quietly. "Just rebellion. Just novelty." There it was, his mother's poison, still circulating in his system weeks later. "Is that what you think people believe?" Layla asked carefully. "It's what everyone believes," he admitted. "My former colleagues, your classmates, the entire gossip circuit. That I'm slumming or having a midlife crisis at 28, and eventually I'll come to my senses." "And what do you believe?" Blake crossed the room, taking her hands. "I believe this is the most real thing in my life. I just want everyone else to see it too." Layla studied his face, the earnestness there, but also the need for validation she'd never noticed before. Had it always been there, this hunger for approval beneath his confident exterior? "We don't need to prove anything to anyone," she said gently. "Don't we?" A edge crept into his voice. "Every time we go out, people stare. Every business meeting, I see the questions in their eyes. Every time your mother visits, she watches me like she's waiting for me to reveal my true colors." "My mother is protective," Layla defended. "She's seen too many wealthy white men treat black women as temporary adventures." The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them. Blake's face closed, hurt flashing across his features. "Is that what you think this is?" he asked quietly. "An adventure?" "No," she said quickly. "Of course not. But you wonder sometimes." It wasn't a question. "You're waiting for me to get bored or cave to pressure. Aren't you wondering the same about me?" she challenged. "If I'm with you for your money, your connections, your world?" The accusation hung between them, the first real crack in their united front. "Sometimes I still wonder," she admitted, voice barely audible, "if I'm just your rebellion against everything you were raised to want." Blake flinched as if struck. "After everything we've been through? After what I've given up?" "That's exactly it," Layla said, the dam breaking on fears she'd suppressed for weeks. You've given up so much. Your family, your inheritance, your social standing. What happens when you realize the cost? I know exactly what it cost, he snapped. I made that choice with open eyes. Did you? Or were you just running from a life that felt empty? The question hit its mark. Blake stepped back, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Where is this coming from? He demanded. Last week we were talking about vacation plans. Now you're questioning everything. Layla sank onto a moving box, suddenly exhausted. I am scared, Blake. I'm scared that one day you'll wake up and realize you traded a kingdom for what? A girl for Brooklyn with student loans and a mother who cleans houses. That's not fair, he said, voice softening. To either of us. Isn't it? The world doesn't believe in us. Maybe they're right to doubt. Blake knelt before her, taking her hands again. The world doesn't get a vote. This is our life, not theirs. But we still live in that world, she insisted. We can't just pretend those pressures don't exist. Before he could respond, the buzzer rang. The delivery person with dinner they'd ordered hours ago and nearly forgotten. The interruption broke the tension, giving them both space to breathe. They ate in relative silence, the argument not resolved but paused. After dinner, Blake pulled her close on their new couch, his body seeking reconciliation even if his words hadn't found it yet. I don't care what anyone thinks, he murmured against her hair. I just want you. The physical connection between them had never faltered, even as doubts crept into other aspects of their relationship. Layla turned in his arms, her mouth finding his with familiar hunger. They came together with the urgency of people trying to prove something to each other, to themselves, to the watching world. Later, tangled in sheets on their new mattress, his choice, her bedding, Blake traced patterns on her bare shoulder. We're going to be okay, he said, more statement than question. Yes, she agreed, wanting to believe it. The next morning, a package arrived. The latest issue of Manhattan Elite magazine, with both their faces on the cover, Beauty and the Billionaire. Inside text, most controversial romance. Layla flipped through it while Blake showered, her stomach nodding with each page. The article was surprisingly balanced, detailing their courtroom battle and Blake's new business ventures. But it was the pull quote that froze her blood. Blake Remington quoted from that first night. Sure, I'll dance with the fat girl. 20 grand says I can make her smile. He had never told her about the bet's exact words. When Blake emerged from the shower, he found her sitting motionless, the magazine open in her lap. What's wrong? He asked, then saw the cover. Oh, that. My assistant mentioned they were running a feature. Is it bad? Wordlessly, Layla handed him the magazine, open to the damning quote. Blake's face drained of color as he read it. Layla, I can explain. $20,000, she said quietly. That was my price tag. Not even for sex, just for a smile. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Her voice remained eerily calm. Explain to me how betting on the fat black girl's reaction is anything but exactly what it sounds like. Blake sat heavily on the edge of the bed. It was before I knew you, before that dance. I was a different person then. Were you? Or was that the real you, and everything since has been the performance? That's not fair, he protested. One stupid comment doesn't erase everything we've built, but it does explain how we started. Layla stood, wrapping her robe tighter. With me as a joke. Adare, a charity case. And then I fell in love with you, Blake said desperately. Doesn't that count for anything? The word love hung between them. The first time either had said aloud. But instead of bringing them closer, it only highlighted the chasm opening between them. I need some time, Layla said finally. To think. To figure out if we're building something real or just an elaborate reaction to that first night. Layla, please. I'm going to stay with my cousin for a few days. Her decision crystallized as she spoke. I need space to sort through this. Don't leave. Blake stood, reaching for her. We can work through this together. Can we? She stepped back from his touch. Or are we just clinging to each other because everyone said we wouldn't last? The question had no answer, at least none that would satisfy either of them in this moment. Layla packed a small bag while Blake watched in helpless silence. All their earlier arguments about proving their relationship to the world now hollow in the face of this fundamental doubt. At the door, she paused. "I'm not ending things," she said quietly. "I just need clarity, away from this bubble we've created." After she left, Blake stood in their half-unpacked apartment, surrounded by the physical evidence of their merged lives. He picked up the magazine again, staring at the quote that had detonated like a bomb in their relationship. The truth was uglier than she knew. The beginning of their story tainted by cruelty disguised as humor. The question now was whether their ending would be beautiful enough to justify it. When have your own insecurities become your relationship's biggest threat? How did you overcome them? Share your experience in the comments below. The beginning of their story was uglier than she knew. The question was whether their ending would be beautiful enough to justify it. 3 days, 72 hours since Layla had walked out of their apartment with a small overnight bag and shattered certainty. Blake had respected her request for space, limiting himself to a single text each day. "I'm here when you're ready to talk." No pressure, no manipulation, no grand gestures to force her return. Inside, he was falling apart. The magazine article had gone viral. The cruel quote about the bet reshared across social media platforms with hot takes about wealth, privilege, and fetishization. Blake had issued a statement acknowledging the comment's ugliness while emphasizing how meeting Layla had transformed his perspective, but the damage was done. Court of public opinion. Guilty. On the 4th day, he couldn't stand it anymore. Not the separation, though that was its own unique torture, but the thought that Layla might believe their entire connection was built on mockery. He found himself outside her cousin's Brooklyn apartment building, flowers in hand like some cliché from a romantic comedy. He buzzed her apartment, heart hammering against his ribs. "Yes." Her cousin's voice crackled through the intercom. "It's Blake. I need to see her." A long pause. "She doesn't want visitors." "Please," he said, abandoning pride. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Another pause, then the door buzzed open. Blake took the stairs 2 at a time, hope and dread battling in his chest. Layla's cousin met him at the apartment door, her expression guarded. "She's on the fire escape," she said, stepping aside. "Don't make me regret this." Blake found Layla sitting on the metal landing, knees pulled to her chest, staring out at the Brooklyn skyline. The setting sun painted everything in gold and shadow, including the tears on her cheeks. She quickly wiped away when she heard him. "I asked for space," she said without turning. "I know." He remained in the window, not invading her sanctuary. "But I couldn't let you believe a lie." Now she looked at him, eyes red-rimmed but clear. Which lie would that be? There seemed to be so many. The barb hit its mark, but Blake pushed through the pain. The lie that what we have isn't real. That it started as mockery and never became something more. Did it? She stood, facing him fully. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you took a bet to dance with a fat girl, then got caught in your own game. Is that really what you think?" The hurt in his voice was raw, unfiltered. After everything, Layla stood by the window, city lights blurring through tears she refused to acknowledge. Her reflection fragmented in glass, just as the narrative of them had been from the start. "I don't know what to think anymore," she admitted. That quote, it confirmed every insecurity I've ever had. Every doubt about why someone like you would want someone like me. "Someone like me," Blake repeated bitterly. "The rich white guy who couldn't possibly see beyond appearance or background. That's not fair. None of this is fair," he countered. "Not the way we met, not the judgment we've faced, not the pressure trying to tear us apart. But that doesn't make what grew between us any less real." Layla wrapped her arms around herself, protective. "I need to know the truth, Blake. All of it. No more discovering pieces of our story from magazines." He nodded, setting the forgotten flowers aside. "The truth is ugly. I was exactly the privileged jerk you first thought I was. The bet was real. The words were real. I walked up to you thinking it was a joke, a way to entertain my friends." She flinched but didn't interrupt. "And then you looked at me," he continued, voice softening. "Really looked at me, with those eyes that see through everything. And something shifted. The music, the dance, your hand in mine. Suddenly it wasn't a joke anymore. It was the first authentic moment I'd had in years. One dance doesn't erase the bet, she said quietly. No, it doesn't. Nothing erases that beginning. He stepped closer, still not touching her. But every moment since has been me trying to become someone worthy of that dance. Someone who sees you, really sees you, the way you saw through me. Layla turned away, looking back at the skyline. I want to believe you. Then believe this, Blake said, his voice steady despite the fear of losing her. I've never apologized for who I am. The privilege, the wealth, the advantages I was born into. But I've spent every day since meeting you trying to become someone better than who I was raised to be. And if I can't get past how we started, she asked, the question barely audible. Then I'll respect that, he said simply. But I'll also spend the rest of my life proving that one ugly moment doesn't define who I am, or what we could be. The honesty between them felt raw, exposed, like a wound finally cleaned but still throbbing with pain. Neither moved to close the physical distance, the emotional chasm still too wide. I need more time, Layla said finally. Blake nodded, swallowing disappointment. I understand. As he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. But I'm coming home tomorrow, to our apartment. We can't figure this out if we're apart. Hope flickered, fragile but present. I'll be waiting. The next day, Layla returned to find their apartment transformed. Not with grand gestures or expensive gifts, but with completion, all the boxes unpacked, their possessions thoughtfully arranged in ways that honored both their tastes. Blake had finished the work of merging their lives, a silent statement of faith in their future. He was waiting with dinner cooking, no pressure or expectations beyond welcome. You've been busy, she observed, setting down her bag. Needed to keep my hands occupied, he admitted. My mind was a mess. They ate with careful conversation, rebuilding connection through mundane details and shared space. After dinner, they sat on opposite ends of the couch, the physical distance a reflection of emotional caution. I talked to my mother, Layla said finally. About us. About the bet. Blake tensed, waiting. She said something that surprised me. Layla continued. She said beginnings matter less than what you build afterward. Your mother said that? About me? A small smile touched Layla's lips. She also said she'd break your kneecaps if you ever hurt me again, so don't get too comfortable. The tension broke slightly, a shared laugh easing the heaviness between them. I got a call today, Blake said after a moment, from my mother's assistant. Apparently, my mother has purchased a house for Mavis. Said it was long overdue compensation for years of loyal service. Layla's eyes widened. What? The deed arrived this afternoon. 3-bedroom in a nice neighborhood, fully paid off. No strings attached. Why would she do that? Blake shook his head, equally puzzled. The note just said, some debts need paying regardless of circumstances. Layla's phone rang, interrupting the moment. Her mother's voice came through, excited and confused. That boy just bought me a house, Layla. Said it was 20 years overdue compensation. Said it doesn't matter if you never speak to him again. Some debts need paying regardless. As Layla listened, realization dawned. Blake hadn't sent the house as manipulation or bribe. He'd done it anonymously, expecting no credit, no reconciliation, no benefit to himself. It wasn't me, Blake said when she ended the call, reading her expression. It was my mother. Your mother, Layla repeated, disbelieving. The same woman who fired her over us. Apparently. He looked as confused as she felt. Maybe seeing us fall apart made her reconsider some things. Or maybe she's playing some longer game I don't understand yet. The revelation hung between them, not solving everything, but shifting the landscape of their conflict. Blake's atonement wasn't performance. It continued even when no one was watching. And somewhere in the Remington family, change was happening, however small or strategic. Where does this leave us? Blake asked finally, the question that had haunted them both for days. Layla moved closer on the couch, not touching him yet, but reducing the distance. I don't know, she admitted, but I think we keep building one day at a time, with open eyes about where we started and where we might go. That's enough for me, he said simply. That night, they slept in the same bed, but without touching, a deliberate space between them. Not separation, but respect, room for healing before reconnection. In the darkness, Layla's hand found his across the divide, fingers intertwining in silent promise. The beginning of their story was uglier than she had known, but perhaps their ending could be beautiful enough to justify it. Could you forgive someone whose interest began as mockery, even if it grew into love? Is redemption possible when beginnings are tainted? Share your thoughts in the comments. Forgiveness wasn't a gift she gave him. It was a choice she made for herself, a recognition that their story deserved an ending written by truth, not cruelty. Healing came in small moments over the following weeks. Morning coffee, shared in comfortable silence. Evening walks through Brooklyn neighborhoods, fingers loosely intertwined. Honest conversations that stretched into the night, excavating fears and hopes with equal care. They were building something new from the ashes of revelation, not ignoring the ugly beginning, but refusing to let it dictate their future. My mother called. Blake said one evening as they prepared dinner together, a domestic rhythm they'd established in their reconciliation. She's invited us to the annual charity gala next month. Layla nearly dropped the knife she was using to chop vegetables. Us? As in both of us. That was my reaction too. He stirred the sauce simmering on their stove, his recipe, her spice adjustments. I think it's her version of an olive branch. Or a public test, Layla countered. Parade the controversial girlfriend in front of Connecticut society and see if she embarrasses herself. Blake considered this. Possibly. My mother rarely does anything without multiple motives. Then why consider it? He turned to face her, wooden spoon still in hand. Because hiding feels like shame. And I'm not ashamed of us. The simple declaration hung between them, powerful in its certainty. After weeks of rebuilding trust, of questioning foundations, his unwavering conviction touched something deep in Layla's heart. What would it mean to you? She asked. Going back there with me on your arm? It would mean claiming our narrative, he said thoughtfully, not letting gossip and speculation define us. And honestly, showing my mother that her world didn't end because her son chose love over strategy. Layla set down her knife, moving to wrap her arms around his waist from behind. Then we go, she said against his shoulder. But on our terms, not hers. The night of the gala arrived with all the weight of symbolism neither could ignore. The event would be held at the same venue as Blake's engagement party, the ballroom where they'd first danced, where a cruel bet had unexpectedly changed both their lives. Layla stood before the mirror in their bedroom, examining her reflection with critical eyes. The dress she designed and sewn herself was a statement. Deep purple silk that celebrated her curves rather than apologizing for them, cut to showcase strong shoulders and the soft dip of her waist. You're beautiful, Blake said from the doorway, already dressed in his tuxedo. I'm terrified, she admitted, turning to face him. Walking back into that room, seeing those same people who whispered about me before. We walk in together, he promised, crossing to take her hands. Equal partners. The car ride to Connecticut passed in thoughtful silence, both lost in memories of how far they'd come since that first night. When they arrived, photographers lined the entrance. The Remington Charity Gala always attracted press, but this year held the added drama of Blake's return with his controversial girlfriend. Ready? He asked as a driver opened their door. Layla took a deep breath. Ready? The gala ballroom mirrored that first night, crystal and champagne, wealth and whispers. But this time, she entered not as staff's daughter, but as his equal, curves draped in couture that celebrated rather than concealed. Blake's hand rested at the small of her back, not possessive but supportive as they navigated the crowd. Conversations paused as they passed. Eyes followed their progress across the room. But Blake moved with confident purpose, greeting former business associates and family friends with relaxed charm, introducing Layla not as an appendage, but as a partner. Blake. His mother's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. Eleanor Remington stood by the champagne fountain, elegant in midnight blue, her expression carefully neutral. I wasn't certain you would come. Mother. He kissed her cheek with practiced ease. You remember Layla. Eleanor's eyes assessed Layla with cool precision. Of course. The dress is unexpected. I designed it myself, Layla said, meeting the older woman's gaze directly. Purple has always been my color. A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps, or reluctant respect, crossed Eleanor's features. It suits you, she conceded, the smallest possible compliment delivered like a major concession. Thank you for the invitation, Blake said, filling the awkward silence. And for what you did for Mavis Johnson. It was unexpected. Eleanor waved away the comment. 20 years of service deserves recognition. It should have happened sooner. She glanced between them, something calculating in her expression. People are watching. It would make a statement if you opened the dancing, as tradition dictates for the Remington heir. The request, or command, hung between them. Return to the scene of the crime, as it were. Dance again where it all began, but this time with everyone watching, everyone knowing. Blake looked at Layla, the question in his eyes. Her choice. Always her choice now. We'd be honored, Layla said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. As they moved onto the dance floor, whispers followed like ripples in still water. The orchestra began a waltz, the same one they danced to that first night, Layla realized. Eleanor's orchestration, no doubt. Full circle, Blake murmured as he took her in his arms. Not quite, Layla corrected. Last time, you asked me to dance as a joke. This time, we both know exactly what we're doing. They moved together with practiced ease, months of learning each other's rhythms evident in their fluid motion. Blake held her gaze, ignoring the watching crowd, creating a bubble of privacy in the most public of settings. I never thanked you, he said quietly. For what? For seeing me, the real me, beneath all the performance and privilege. For holding me accountable instead of accepting the easy version. Layla's throat tightened with emotion. And I never thanked you for seeing me as whole and complete, not despite my body or my background, but including them. The music swelled around them, but they barely heard it, lost in the private moment they were creating amid hundreds of watching eyes. When the dance ended, applause rippled through the ballroom, polite, perhaps even reluctant, but present. They had survived the gauntlet, not unscathed but unbroken. Later that night, in the luxury hotel suite Blake had booked rather than staying at the family estate, they came together with a passion heightened by public restraint. Their bodies reclaimed the narrative others had tried to write for them, each touch an affirmation of choice rather than circumstance. See me, she whispered against his mouth as he moved above her. Not who you thought I was. Not who they think I am. Me. His answer came in reverent fingers mapping her body like sacred territory, in whispered promises against her skin, in the complete surrender of a man who had found his truth in her arms. Afterward, tangled in expensive sheets, Layla traced the line of his jaw with gentle fingers. We survived. More than survived, he corrected. We thrived. Your mother almost smiled at one point. I think she's warming to me. Blake laughed, the sound rumbling against her cheek where it rested on his chest. That wasn't warmth. That was calculation. She's reassessing where you fit in her world order. And where do I fit? Wherever you choose, he said simply. That's the point we made tonight. We choose our place, not them. The next morning brought unexpected news. A feature in the society pages that was surprisingly positive, noting their obvious connection and Layla's fashion-forward design. The tide of public opinion seemed to be turning, if slowly. As they prepared to check out, the hotel manager approached with an envelope. Ms. Johnson, this was left for you at the front desk. Inside was a business card for one of New York's most exclusive fashion houses with a handwritten note. Your design caught my eye. Let's talk. Marcus Way, creative director. Layla stared at the card in disbelief. This is impossible. Marcus Way never approaches new designers directly. Apparently he does when they make an impression, Blake said, reading over her shoulder. This is amazing, Layla. It's suspicious, she countered. Did you arrange this? I swear I didn't. His surprise seemed genuine, though I wouldn't put it past my mother, honestly. Her version of approval is creating strategic advantage. Whether orchestrated or coincidence, the opportunity represented something significant. Recognition of Layla's talent independent of her relationship with Blake. A bridge to professional respect that had nothing to do with who she was dating. As they drove back to Brooklyn, Layla's phone buzzed with a text from Blake's mother. "The purple was indeed your color. Way is legitimate. Consider it recognition of talent, nothing more." Blake read the message and shook his head, amazed. That's practically a warm embrace coming from her. "Baby steps," Layla agreed, tucking the business card carefully into her wallet. The following weeks brought more bridges across the divide. Blake's former business associates reaching out about potential partnerships, Layla's designs attracting attention beyond the initial way connection, even a civil lunch with Catherine and her new fiancé that ended without bloodshed. The world that had seemed determined to tear them apart was slowly, reluctantly, making space for their existence together. On a crisp fall evening, Blake suggested a walk through Brooklyn Heights, ending at the promenade overlooking Manhattan. The city glittered across the water, a fairy tale landscape of light and possibility. "I've been thinking," he said, arms wrapped around her from behind as they gazed at the skyline. "Dangerous," she teased, leaning back against his chest. "About us. About the future." Something in his tone made her turn to face him. "What about it?" Blake took a deep breath, then dropped to one knee on the weathered boards of the promenade. The ring he pulled from his pocket wasn't the massive diamond his status might have suggested, but a unique design of platinum and sapphires that matched the purple she loved. "We've talked about marriage practically, logically," he said, voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "But I wanted to do this properly, to mark the moment." Layla's breath caught as he continued. "This isn't about proving anything to anyone else. It's about choosing each other officially and permanently." He held up the ring. "Layla Johnson, will you marry me?" The question hung between them, simple yet profound. They had discussed marriage as a future possibility, but this formal proposal, this public declaration, felt significant in ways neither had fully anticipated. "Yes," she said simply, her smile brighter than the city lights behind them. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, a thought struck her with such clarity it took her breath away. This wasn't just about them anymore. There was something she needed to tell him, something that would change everything again. When have you rewritten a painful beginning into something beautiful? Share your story of transformation below. She once believed love was a luxury she couldn't afford, until the day the richest man she knew offered her the only thing that mattered: choice. The ring caught morning light as Layla examined it, still not quite believing the weight of it on her finger. 3 days into their engagement, and the reality was still settling around her like a new coat she wasn't sure fit properly. Blake watched her from the doorway of their bathroom, toothbrush in hand. Having second thoughts, he asked, only half joking. "No," she said quickly, "just adjusting. It's a lot to process. We can take our time," he assured her. "Long engagement, short engagement, whatever feels right." Layla nodded, grateful for his patience. There was something she needed to tell him, something she'd discovered just days before his proposal, but the moment never seemed right. How do you tell your newly minted fiancé that your future just got considerably more complicated? "I was thinking," Blake said, returning to the sink to finish brushing his teeth, "we should visit the estate this weekend." Layla looked up sharply. "Your family estate? What?" He rinsed and wiped his mouth before answering. "To tell my mother in person, and to show you something." "Is this another test?" she asked warily. "Because I think we've passed enough of those." Blake crossed to sit beside her on the bed, taking her hands. "No tests, no games. I just want to show you where it all started. Not the ballroom, but the real beginning. The kitchen where your mother worked for 20 years. The place that connected our lives long before we knew it. Understanding dawned. You want to propose there?" "Again?" "Not exactly." His thumbs traced circles on her palms. "I want to acknowledge where we came from, so we can fully choose where we're going." The sentiment touched her deeply. For all their progress, they had never fully confronted the class divide that had initially defined them. Her mother's service in his family's home, the power imbalance that had shaped their earliest connections. "Okay," she agreed. "This weekend." The Remington estate looked different in daylight, less imposing and more simply large. Old money large, with the quiet confidence of generations rather than the flashy display of new wealth. Blake drove them through the gates himself, no driver or fanfare announcing their arrival. Eleanor Remington received them in the sitting room, her surprise at Layla's presence carefully masked beneath social polish. "Blake didn't mention you'd be joining him," she said, offering tea with practiced hospitality. "I thought it would be better to share our news in person," Blake replied, taking Layla's hand deliberately. Eleanor's eyes dropped to the ring, narrowing slightly as she assessed its size and quality. "I see congratulations are in order." "Thank you," Layla said, meeting the older woman's gaze directly. "We're very happy. I'm sure you are." Eleanor set down her teacup with precise movement. "And have you discussed the practical arrangements?" "Prenuptial agreements are standard in our family." "Mother," Blake warned. "It's a reasonable question," Eleanor countered. "The Remington assets are considerable, even with your independent status. We'll handle the legal details privately," Blake said firmly. "That's not why we're here." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Then why are you here? Surely you didn't expect my blessing." "Not expectation. Hope, perhaps." Blake's voice softened slightly. "You're still my mother. This is still my family, complicated as our relationship has become." Something flickered in Eleanor's expression, not quite softening, but a momentary crack in the facade. "And what does your bride-to-be think of marrying into this complicated family?" Layla straightened, finding her voice. "I think families are always complicated. The question is whether they're willing to grow." Eleanor studied her with new interest. "Growth requires adaptation on all sides, Ms. Johnson." "Layla," she corrected gently. "And yes, it does." A silence stretched between them, not comfortable, but not entirely hostile either. Progress of a sort. "May I show Layla the kitchen?" Blake asked, changing direction. "And the gardens?" Eleanor waved permission. "Of course, though I don't see the appeal of service areas as a tour highlight." "History matters," Blake said simply, leading Layla from the room. The kitchen was massive and modern, all professional-grade appliances and marble countertops. But unlike the formal areas of the house, it felt lived in, with cookbooks showing use and plants thriving on windowsills. "This is where your mother worked?" Blake said quietly. "Where she prepared meals while I was upstairs, oblivious to her existence beyond the food that appeared when summoned." Layla ran her hand along a counter, imagining her mother here day after day, year after year. She never complained, just said the Remingtons paid well and on time, which was more than some families did. The bare minimum of decency presented as generosity, Blake acknowledged. "I never questioned it, any of it, until you did," Layla reminded him, squeezing his hand. He led her through the kitchen to a back door opening onto a formal garden. Stone pathways wound between precisely trimmed hedges and seasonal blooms, a showcase of controlled natural beauty. "I want to build something with you," Blake said as they walked. "Not just a marriage or a family, but a legacy different from the one I was handed. Something that acknowledges privilege without weaponizing it." "What does that look like?" Layla asked, genuinely curious. "I'm not entirely sure yet," he admitted, "but I know it starts with this." He stopped at a stone bench overlooking a reflecting pool. "This was my grandfather's favorite spot. Before the money, before the status, he would sit here and dream about building something that mattered." And did he build something that mattered? He built wealth, Blake said thoughtfully, which matters in some ways. But I think he lost sight of his original purpose somewhere along the way. "And what's your purpose?" Layla asked, the question suddenly feeling monumental. Blake turned to face her fully, taking both her hands. "To create something authentic, with you, whatever form that takes." The wedding venue wasn't his family's church or her neighborhood chapel, but neutral sacred ground. A restored historical building once segregated, now transformed into space where all were welcomed, history acknowledged but not allowed to dictate the future. They planned it together over the following months, each decision a careful balance of traditions kept and discarded. Layla designed her own dress, a creation that honored her curves while incorporating subtle elements of both their cultural backgrounds. Blake handled logistics with the same precision he'd once applied to business deals, but with a joy his former colleagues would have found unrecognizable. The guest list became its own statement. Blake's business associates alongside Layla's design school friends, his remaining family connections next to her mother's church community. A deliberate integration of worlds that had once seemed impossibly separate. 1 week before the wedding, as they finalized seating arrangements in their Brooklyn apartment, Blake received an unexpected email. "It's from my mother," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "She's asking if she can bring someone to the wedding." "A date?" Layla asked, equally surprised. "No." Blake stared at his screen in disbelief. "Your mother. She wants to accompany Mavis as her guest, not just attend separately." Layla set down her seating chart. "That's unexpected, to put mildly." He looked up, confusion clear in his eyes. "What do you think it means?" "I think," Layla said carefully, "it means growth is possible in the most unlikely places." The night before their wedding, Blake took Layla to the rooftop garden of their newly purchased brownstone, a forever home they'd chosen together, combining his financial resources with her design vision. String lights created a canopy of soft gold against the Brooklyn skyline, a private celebration before the public ceremony. "Are you nervous?" he asked, pouring champagne into flutes. "About marrying you?" "No." Layla accepted her glass. "About telling you my news?" "Terrified." Blake froze midpool. "What news?" Layla took a deep breath. This was the moment she'd been postponing for weeks, uncertain how he would react, how it would change their carefully constructed plans. "I'm pregnant," she said simply. 8 weeks. "I found out just before you proposed." The champagne bottle slipped from Blake's hand, saved from shattering only by the outdoor rug beneath them. His expression cycled rapidly through shock, confusion, and finally, incandescent joy. "A baby," he whispered, as if saying it too loudly might make it disappear. "We're having a baby?" Layla nodded, tears filling her eyes at his reaction. "I wasn't sure how you'd feel. We never really discussed children, timing, any of it." "How I'd feel." Blake set down his glass and pulled her into his arms. "Layla, this is everything. A family. Our family. You're not upset about the timing? The wedding, your new business ventures, my career, just taking off." "Upset." He laughed, the sound pure happiness. "This isn't a complication. It's a completion. The most perfect possible next chapter." As he kissed her beneath the string lights, Layla felt the last of her fears dissolve. They had survived mockery, family opposition, public scrutiny, and their own doubts. This new challenge, this new joy, would be faced together like everything else. The wedding day dawned clear and bright. October sunshine warming the restored building's stained glass windows. Guests filled the pews, the unusual mix of social circles creating a vibrant energy unlike typical society weddings. Blake waited at the altar, his best man, a former business rival turned friend, beside him. When the doors opened, revealing Layla in her self-designed gown, a collective murmur of appreciation rippled through the gathering. But it was the last row that caught Blake's attention as Layla began her walk. His mother sat there, uninvited but present, face etched with complexity beyond simple acceptance or rejection. Beside her, dignified in a new suit that matched her daughter's color scheme, sat Mavis Johnson. As Layla moved down the aisle, her eyes met Eleanor Remington's in silent acknowledgement, some battles not in victory, but in mutual recognition of new possibilities. The ceremony itself was brief, but meaningful, vows they had written themselves promising partnership rather than possession, growth rather than stagnation. When the minister pronounced them married, Blake's kiss held promise beyond passion, commitment to the future they were creating together. "I'm not asking you to be mine," he had written in his vows, voice steady as he spoke them. "I'm asking if we can be each other's, equal partners, building something neither of us could create alone." At the reception, Eleanor Remington approached the newlyweds, her expression carefully neutral. "Congratulations," she said formally. The ceremony was unconventional but lovely. "Thank you for coming, Mother," Blake replied, genuine despite their complicated history. Eleanor hesitated, then added, "Your grandfather would have approved, I think, of the woman, if not the circumstances." It wasn't a blessing, exactly, but it was acknowledgement, the beginning of a bridge neither had expected to build. As Eleanor moved away, Layla squeezed Blake's hand. "You okay?" "Better than okay," he assured her, hand drifting briefly to rest against her still flat stomach. "We're just getting started. What would your answer be to a proposal that honors your independence while offering partnership? Tell me in the comments what your ideal commitment looks like." The body she once offered as sacrifice now created life by choice, the ultimate testament to what happens when love sees dignity instead of desperation. "Blake, come quick." Layla's voice echoed through their brownstone, excitement vibrating in every syllable. Blake abandoned his home office conference call with a hasty, "I'll call you back," and took the stairs 2 at a time, heart racing with familiar panic. 7 months pregnant, Layla had been experiencing Braxton Hicks contractions all week, each one sending him into protective overdrive. He found her in the nursery, hands pressed to her rounded belly, face glowing with wonder rather than pain. "What's wrong?" he asked, slightly breathless from his sprint. "Nothing's wrong," she laughed, reaching for his hand. "Feel this." She placed his palm against the swell of her stomach, and immediately he felt it, a distinct pattern of movement, like tiny Morse code tapped from within. "Is that?" "Hiccups," Layla confirmed, her smile radiant. "Our daughter has hiccups." Blake knelt before her, both hands now cradling her belly with reverence. The nursery walls glowed soft yellow in the morning light, hand-painted constellations spanning the ceiling. Not just stars from fairy tales, but the actual night sky that had watched over Brooklyn the night they met. "Hello, little one," he whispered against the stretched fabric of Layla's dress. "We can't wait to meet you." Layla ran her fingers through his hair, the simple intimacy of the gesture still capable of sending warmth through him after all they'd been through. "She's going to have you wrapped around her finger from day one." "Just like her mother," Blake agreed, rising to kiss her. Their life had settled into a rhythm neither could have imagined 2 years ago. Blake's independent investment firm had flourished, focusing on businesses owned by women and minorities, a deliberate redirection of capital to communities traditionally overlooked. Layla's design career had taken off after the Marcus Way connection, her inclusive sizing philosophy attracting attention from industry leaders tired of outdated standards. Together, they'd established the Johnson Remington Foundation, specifically funding education for children of domestic workers. The irony of using Remington money to elevate the very people the family had historically employed was lost on no one, least of all Eleanor Remington, who had surprised everyone by making a substantial donation at the foundation's launch. "My mother called," Blake said as they made their way downstairs for breakfast. "She wants to know if we've decided on a name yet." "Still fishing for a family name?" Layla asked, lowering herself carefully onto a kitchen chair. "Subtly, but yes." He poured her prenatal smoothie, a concoction she tolerated rather than enjoyed. "I told her we're still considering options." The truth was, they had chosen a name weeks ago. Zora, after Layla's grandmother and the writer Zora Neale Hurston. Not a Remington family name, but one with meaning and history of its own. They were saving the announcement for the baby shower next week, where both families would be present. "How's your mother doing with the house?" Blake asked, changing subjects. Layla smiled, thinking of Mavis in her new role as community organizer. After settling into the house Eleanor had purchased for her, Mavis had started a support group for domestic workers, advocating for fair wages and treatment. The group now met monthly in her living room, growing from 5 women to over 30. "She's thriving," Layla said proudly. Says she's finally using her voice after decades of strategic silence. Blake nodded, understanding the layers in that statement. "And my mother? Still dropping by unannounced?" "Only twice this month," Layla laughed. "Progress." The unlikely friendship between Eleanor Remington and Mavis Johnson had become one of the most unexpected developments of the past year. What had begun as Eleanor's gesture of atonement had evolved into genuine, if cautious, connection. The women were not friends, exactly, but they had found common ground in their shared experiences as single mothers who had sacrificed for their children in different ways. The foundation opening is next week, Blake reminded her. Are you sure you're up for it? The doctor said to take it easy this last trimester. I designed that building's interior from scratch, Layla said firmly. Wild horses couldn't keep me away either. The Johnson Remington Foundation headquarters occupied a renovated brownstone in Bedford-Stuyvesant, deliberately located in a community that would benefit from its programs. Layla had overseen every detail of the interior design, creating spaces that felt welcoming rather than institutional, hopeful rather than charitable. The day of the opening dawned clear and warm. Early summer sunshine bathing Brooklyn in golden light. Layla wore a dress she'd designed specifically for the occasion, flowing fabric that celebrated her pregnancy rather than concealing it, in the deep purple that had become her signature. Blake watched her with undisguised admiration as she greeted guests, her natural warmth drawing people in despite the formal nature of the event. Press cameras flashed, capturing the unlikely power couple who had defied expectations at every turn. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. Blake spoke about redirecting privilege toward purpose, Layla about creating opportunities rather than charity. When the time came to cut the ribbon, they called both their mothers forward, Eleanor in designer silk, Mavis in a suit Layla had created for her, to join them. This foundation exists because of both of you, Blake said, handing them the ceremonial scissors. One who showed me what privilege looks like, and one who showed me what dignity means. The two women exchanged glances, decades of class division hanging between them. Then, together, they cut the ribbon, flashbulbs capturing the moment of two worlds acknowledging each other as equals, if only symbolically. They're changing things, Mavis said simply as they watched their children address the crowd. Yes, Eleanor replied, the weight of generations in her voice. Perhaps they should. Later that night, exhausted but fulfilled, Blake and Layla retreated to their brownstone. The foundation opening had been covered by major media outlets, their story framed now not as scandal but as evolution, old money finding new purpose, privilege confronting its limitations. In their bedroom, Blake helped Layla out of her shoes, her advanced pregnancy making the simple task challenging. His hands moved to massage her swollen feet, a nightly ritual of care that had become one of their most intimate connections. You were amazing today, he said, thumbs working gentle circles into her arches. Everyone was watching you, not me. Codependent, she corrected with a smile. We're better together than apart. Blake's hands moved from her feet to her belly, cradling the life they'd created. I never imagined this, he admitted. Any of it. The foundation, the marriage, the baby. 2 years ago, my life was all performance and no substance. And now it's real, messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. Layla placed her hand over his where it rested on her stomach. She placed his hand on her growing belly, where life they'd created by choice, not contract, stirred beneath her skin. This is what happens, she whispered, when sacrifice becomes celebration. His lips traced the stretch marks on her hips with the devotion of reading Braille. These are my favorite, he whispered, the map that led me home. Her laughter, full-bodied and unrestrained, filled the room, the sound of a woman who no longer doubted her place in her own story. In the months and years that followed, their story continued to evolve. Zora Mavis Remington arrived on a stormy July night, her wails of protest giving way to curious eyes that seemed to take in everything. Blake cut the cord with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the miracle of creation and the responsibility of protection. Their brownstone expanded to accommodate Mavis moving into the garden apartment, giving Zora the gift of her grandmother's daily presence while maintaining everyone's independence. Eleanor visited monthly, her stiffness gradually softening in the face of her granddaughter's unfiltered affection. The foundation grew, establishing scholarships and mentorship programs that created tangible change in communities long overlooked. Blake's business ventures flourished, his reputation for ethical investment attracting partners who shared his evolved values. Layla's design house became known for inclusive sizing and sustainable practices, challenging industry standards from within rather than from the margins. And through it all, they remained each other's center, not in the consuming way of fairy tales, but in the steady partnership of two people who had chosen each other despite every obstacle. On Zora's third birthday, they hosted a party in the rooftop garden of their brownstone. Friends and family gathered to celebrate. The unlikely mix of worlds that had once seemed impossibly separate, now mingling with surprising ease. As twilight fell and guests began to leave, Blake found Layla standing at the edge of the roof, looking out over the Brooklyn skyline. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. "Happy?" he asked simply. "Beyond anything I could have imagined," she answered, leaning back against him. "You complete," he said, the word encompassing everything they'd built together. Below them, Zora giggled as she showed Eleanor and Mavis how to make proper mud pies in the garden planters. Her dress already ruined, but her joy unrestricted. The two grandmothers exchanged looks of shared conspiracy, momentarily united in their indulgence of the child who bridged their worlds. "They said we wouldn't last," Layla mused, watching the scene below. "That we were too different from worlds too far apart." "They underestimated us," Blake replied. "They always did." The body she had once considered offering as sacrifice in desperate times now created and nurtured life by choice. The ultimate testament to what happens when love sees dignity instead of desperation, when privilege recognizes responsibility instead of entitlement, when two people refuse to let others define the boundaries of their connection. So what would you do if someone saw your worth before you believed in it yourself? Would you run? Or would you build something that lasts? Comment below with what you would have done in her shoes. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that make you feel, think, and maybe even heal a little. Tell me in the comments what aspect of their journey resonated most with you. And remember, the most powerful love doesn't rescue you from your life. It recognizes the strength that's been there all along.